Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a pretty radical idea. What happens when the Jesus you were taught feels like a complete stranger? We're going to see how a group of Asian theologians in a post-colonial world took that very question and totally reimagined their faith to speak to their own reality.
So that's the big question, right? And it's the starting point for everything we're about to get into. For so many Christians in Asia, the image of Jesus they got from Western missionaries just felt, well, Western. It felt disconnected. So what do you do? What happens when the person at the very heart of your faith feels like a stranger in your own home?
And this was way more than just a feeling. It was a real crisis of faith. The version of Christianity that many had inherited from the West just seemed totally silent on the two things that define their everyday lives. Just massive, overwhelming poverty and the fact that they were surrounded by this rich tapestry of other ancient, vibrant religions.
Now, this wasn't some stuffy academic debate happening in an ivory tower. For millions of people, this was a matter of spiritual survival. The question became this burning, urgent thing. How do we find a Jesus who isn't some distant, foreign figure, but one who actually walks alongside the people of Asia, in their suffering and in their joy?
Okay, so to really get what they were trying to do, we've got to look at this incredible metaphor that comes from a Korean play. It just perfectly captures their whole critique of a Christianity that had become rigid and stuck.
So, a theologian named C.S. Song points to this play, The Gold-Crowned Jesus. And in the play, you have these two desperate characters, a beggar and a leper, and they stumble upon a statue of Jesus. But here's the thing. This statue is encased in cement. It's totally silent, completely motionless, just trapped.
And wow, what a powerful image, right? Let's break it down. The cement statue itself, well, that's a Christ who's been trapped by rigid dogmatic tradition. He can't move, he can't speak. The gold crown on its head, that represents a theology that just props up the rich and the powerful. So what's the solution? The play suggests that the people, the masses themselves, have to be the ones to free Jesus from this prison of doctrine.
You see, for C.S. Song, this was the absolute key. The real Jesus isn't some abstract idea you find in a dusty book of rules. No. Jesus is an event, a living, breathing interaction that happens between God and people right in the middle of their everyday struggles. Faith has to be something you live, not just something you recite.
And that idea of liberation, well, that leads us to another really important concept. A Korean scholar named Byung-Moo Ahn argued that all the formal academic study of Christ had completely lost its way. To find the real Jesus, he said, you have to look somewhere else entirely. You have to look to the Minjung.
So what is Minjung? Well, it's a Korean term that translates to the common people. But it's so much more than that. It specifically means the oppressed, the poor, the suffering, and it sees them as the real agents of their own freedom. Ahn's idea was radical. He said the official church didn't hold the true stories of Jesus. The Minjung did, in their own lived experiences of struggle and hope.
All right, let's hop over to Japan now, where another theologian, Kosuke Koyama, was looking at the crucifixion of Jesus and finding a completely different way of thinking about power, a power that's rooted not in strength, but in weakness.
Koyama zooms in on this one line, this taunt that's thrown at Jesus on the cross, and he just flips it on its head. He says this isn't a sign of failure at all. Actually, it's the ultimate expression of what he called divine sincerity. The true power of Jesus, Koyama argued, wasn't in being able to save himself. It was in completely giving up that power for the sake of other people.
And this is where Koyama's critique of the modern world just gets so sharp. He sets up this incredible contrast between the mutilated hands of Christ, which are slow, maybe inefficient, but represent deep, personal, sincere healing, and the attractive hands of technology, which are fast and efficient, sure, but they're impersonal. They just reduce living, breathing people to numbers in a file.
So Koyama came up with this amazing phrase to describe Jesus, a periphery-oriented center. What does that even mean? Well, it means that even though Jesus might be the center of the faith, his energy, his focus is always pushing outwards, towards the edges, towards the people on the margins. And this was a huge challenge to a Western theology that Koyama saw as being obsessed with protecting its own power right there in the center.
Okay, so from Korea and Japan, let's travel to India. How did these kinds of ideas take root there, especially when facing something as massive and deeply entrenched as the caste system?
Well, this Indian theologian, Sebastian Kapan, had a really interesting take. He said, look, let's not just copy-paste Western Christianity here. Instead, he saw the story of Jesus as a subversive, creative force, something that could actually work from inside Indian culture to help it break free from its own oppressive parts.
And Kappan really drew a line in the sand between two very different ways of thinking. He said that a lot of traditional Indian thought is about finding freedom from this world, from history. But Jesus' vision was all about finding freedom in this world, right here and now. Traditional morality was often about keeping the cosmic order, but Jesus' ethics, it was all about the infinite value of every single person. And that, right there, was the moral firepower needed to challenge a system like caste, which is built on denying that very idea.
Okay, so we've been all over Asia, right? Korea, Japan, India. What's the common thread here? What ties all these different powerful ideas together?
What it really boils down to is a few crucial shifts. They were all trying to move away from abstract dogma and get to a lived reality. They were looking for an Asian Jesus, not just a European Christ. They were shifting the focus away from the powerful sinners and onto the struggling periphery. They wanted to break that silent statue out of the cement and give a voice to the oppressed. They wanted to turn a faith that was just about worshiping a figure into an event that you actually live every single day.
And that leaves us with a really fascinating, almost paradoxical question to think about. For these theologians, changing the story of Jesus wasn't about betraying their faith, not at all. For them, it was the only way to keep it alive, to keep it true and authentic for their people in their time. So it makes you wonder, to keep a story true, how much does it have to change?